Every night, thousands of truckers drive under overpasses alone. In the dark, most see nothing, but some see figures standing on the railings, hear footsteps on their roofs, find things that shouldn't exist. Tonight, I'm sharing 10 true encounters that will make you never look at an overpass the same way again. Turn off your lights. This is real, and it starts now. The dashboard clock read 2:47 a.m. when I passed the exit for North Platte, Nebraska. I'd been driving for 11 hours straight, hauling a full load of refrigerated beef from Omaha to Denver. The highway stretched out before me like a black ribbon cutting through an ocean of darkness. No streetlights, no gas stations, no other vehicles. Just me, my Peterbilt, and the endless hum of the diesel engine. I-80 is one of those highways that feels alive during the day, semi-trucks, RVs, families on road trips. But at night, especially in the dead hours between 2 and 5 a.m., it becomes something else entirely. It becomes empty, hollow, like the world has been abandoned and you're the only person left. I was about 40 miles past North Platte when I saw the overpass ahead. It was one of those old concrete structures, probably built in the 60s or 70s. Narrow, cracked, covered in years of grime and exhaust stains. Nothing special. I'd passed under 100 just like it on this route alone. But as my headlights swept across the bridge, I saw something that made my foot ease off the accelerator. A man was standing on the overpass. Not walking, not leaning against the railing, just standing, perfectly still, right at the edge, looking down at the highway. At first, I thought maybe it was a stranded motorist, someone whose car had broken down. Maybe he was waiting for help, trying to flag down a passing truck. But something about the way he stood there didn't sit right with me. His posture was too rigid, too unnatural. I slowed down to about 40 miles per hour as I approached. My headlights illuminated him more clearly now. He was tall, maybe 6'3" or 6'4", thin, almost skeletal. He wore what looked like an old suit, dark and stained, like it had been buried and dug up. His arms hung straight down at his sides, lifeless, like a puppet with cut strings. But it was his head that made my stomach twist. It was tilted, not slightly like someone trying to get a better view. It was tilted at a sharp, unnatural angle, cocked to the left like his neck was broken. Even from a distance, I could feel that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. I glanced at my CB radio, thinking about calling it in. But before I could reach for the mic, I was already passing under the bridge. That's when I made the mistake of looking up. Through the windshield, I could see the underside of the overpass. Stained concrete, rusted rebar, years of pigeon droppings. And standing directly above me, visible through the gap between the road and the bridge, was the man. He was looking straight down at me, not tracking my movement, not following my truck as it passed, just staring, fixed, locked onto me like a predator watching prey. His face was pale, unnaturally pale. His eyes were sunken, deep in their sockets, but I swear I could feel them boring into me. And his mouth, it was open, not in shock or surprise, just open, like a door left ajar. I punched the accelerator. The engine roared. My trailer swayed slightly as I hit 60, then 70 miles per hour. I didn't care about speed limits. I didn't care about fuel efficiency. I just needed to put distance between me and that overpass. My heart was hammering in my chest. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see him running after me or standing in the middle of the road. But for the first few minutes, there was nothing, just empty highway behind me. Then, about a mile later, I glanced at my driver's side mirror, and my blood turned to ice. He was standing in the middle of the road, a mile behind me, directly in the center of the westbound lane, lit only by the faint red glow of my taillights. He wasn't moving, wasn't walking toward me or away, just standing there, arms at his sides, head tilted at that same broken angle. I blinked hard, thinking maybe I was seeing things. Fatigue, hallucinations, road hypnosis. I'd been driving too long without rest. That had to be it. But when I looked again, He was still there. I grabbed my CB radio and keyed the mic. My voice came out shaky. Breaker? Breaker. This is driver 1 to 9 westbound on I-80, mile marker 177. Anyone out there? Over. Static. I tried again. This is driver 1 to 9. I've got a possible 10 to 90 on the highway. Man standing in the roadway. Repeat, man in the roadway. Can anyone copy? More static. Then a crackling voice broke through. This is driver 4 to 4. I copy you 1 to 9. What's your 20? Mile marker 177. Just past North Platte. There's a guy, he's just standing in the middle of the road. I don't know if he's drunk or hurt or what, but something's wrong. Real wrong. There was a pause. Then the voice came back, quieter this time. You said mile marker 177? Yeah. Why? Another pause. Longer this time. You need to keep driving 1 to 9. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just keep moving. What? What are you talking about? Just trust me. Keep your foot on that accelerator and don't stop until you hit the state line. The radio went silent. I tried calling back, but no one answered. I looked in my mirror again. The figure was gone. Relief washed over me for about half a second. Then I realized something that made my throat tighten. I had been watching my mirror for less than 10 seconds. Maybe 5. There was no way he could have walked off the road that fast. No way he could have disappeared. Unless he didn't walk. I forced myself to keep my eyes forward. My speedometer climbed to 75. 80. I didn't care. I just needed to get out of that area. Away from that overpass. Away from whatever the hell I had just seen. For the next 20 minutes, I drove in silence. No radio, no music, just the sound of the engine and my own ragged breathing. Then, just as I was starting to convince myself that it was over, I heard it, a sound from the roof of my cab. Tap, 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 slow, deliberate, like knuckles rapping against metal. I slammed on the brakes. The truck screeched to a halt on the shoulder, throwing up gravel and dust. I sat there, engine idling, staring at the ceiling of my cab. Silence. Maybe it was a bird, or a piece of debris I'd picked up, or the wind. It had to be something normal, something explainable. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Nothing. I exhaled slowly, gripping the steering wheel. I was losing it. The lack of sleep was getting to me. That's all this was. I reached for the gear shift. Tap, tap, tap. This time it was louder, closer, right above my head. My entire body went rigid. I grabbed my flashlight from the passenger seat and kicked open the door. The cold Nebraska air hit me like a slap. I stepped out onto the gravel, shining my light up at the roof of the cab. Nothing. I walked around the truck slowly, checking every angle. The roof was empty. No scratches. No dents. No sign that anything had been up there. I climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. That's when I saw it. On my windshield, on the outside, a handprint, long, thin, fingers stretched impossibly wide, pressed against the glass like someone had leaned down from the roof and placed their hand there. But here's what made me nearly pass out. The handprint was facing inward, like someone had been clinging to the outside of my windshield, watching me the whole time. I didn't stop driving until the sun came up. I refueled in Colorado and told the attendant everything. He didn't believe me, thought I was tweaking on caffeine pills. But 2 days later, I stopped at a truck stop in Wyoming. I was telling another driver about what happened when an old-timer at the counter turned around. "You saw him," he said quietly. "Saw who?" "The man on the overpass, near North Platte, mile marker 177. My blood ran cold. "How do you know?" The old man took a sip of his coffee. 3 drivers reported the same thing in the last 2 months. Same overpass, same figure, same broken neck. "Who is he?" The old man shook his head. "No one knows. But one of those drivers, he didn't make it to his destination. They found his truck parked on the side of the road. Doors locked, engine running, but he was gone. Just gone. He stood up, dropped a few bills on the counter, and looked me dead in the eye. "If you ever see him again," he said, "don't stop, don't look back, and whatever you do, don't let him hitch a ride." I never drove that route again. Yeah, that's correct. Why? There was a long pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, like the dispatcher was talking to someone off mic. 8 to 2, we're gonna have a unit check it out. Continue on your route. Do not stop. Repeat, do not stop. Copy that. But what's going on? Has someone else reported this? Another pause. Just keep moving. 8 to 2. We'll handle it. The radio went silent. I tried calling back, but no one responded. I set the mic down and focused on the road ahead, trying to shake off the image of that blank face and those mechanical arms. I drove for another 20 minutes, putting as much distance as I could between myself and that overpass. The highway remained empty. The radio stayed quiet. I started to convince myself that maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe the guy was just drunk or high, and that's why his movements seemed so strange. Then my CB radio crackled to life. "Breaker, breaker, this is driver 3 to 7 southbound on I-81. I've got a 10 to 96 situation on an overpass near mile marker 63. There's a guy up there waving down traffic. Anyone else see this? Over." My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the mic. "Driver 3 to 7, this is 8 to 2. I just passed that same overpass 20 minutes ago. Same guy, same spot. Do not stop. Repeat, do not stop. Something is very wrong." 8 to 2, what do you mean? Is there an accident or not? No accident. Just trust me. Keep driving. Radio it in, but don't stop. There was a brief silence. Then copy that. 8 to 2. This is weird, man. He's still waving. Right now, as I'm passing under. It's like he doesn't even see me. He's just waving. I know. Just keep going. Roger. I'm calling it in. The radio went quiet again. I sat there in the darkness, gripping the wheel, my mind racing. The same man, the same overpass, still waving. 20 minutes later. That's not possible. Unless he never stopped. I pulled into a truck stop about 50 miles south of the overpass, just outside of Bristol. It was one of those 24-hour places with a diner, fuel pumps, and a small convenience store. I parked, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment, trying to process what I'd seen. The clock on my dashboard read 1:47 a.m. I climbed out of the cab and headed inside. The diner was nearly empty, just a waitress wiping down tables and an older couple sitting in a booth by the window. I ordered coffee and sat at the counter, pulling out my phone. I needed to know if anyone else had reported this. I searched online for I-81 Tennessee overpass man waving and got nothing. I tried different variations. Still nothing. Finally, I posted in a trucker forum I frequented. Anyone else driving I-81 southbound through TN tonight? There's a guy on an overpass near mile marker 63 waving down traffic. Been there for at least 20 minutes. Police have been notified, but be careful out there. I set my phone down and sipped my coffee. The waitress refilled my cup without saying a word. About 10 minutes later, another truck pulled into the lot. A big freightliner. The driver climbed out and walked into the diner, the same driver 3 to 7 I'd talked to on the radio. I recognized his voice when he ordered coffee. I turned to him. "You're 3 to 7, right? From the radio?" He looked at me, nodded. "Yeah, you're 8 to 2. That's me." He sat down next to me, rubbing his face. "Man, that was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I've been driving this route for 12 years, and I've never..." His phone buzzed. He pulled it out and stared at the screen. His face went pale. "What is it?" I asked. He turned the phone toward me. It was a text from another driver in our forum. "Just past mile marker 63 on I-81. Same guy, still waving. Called police again. They said they already sent a unit, but he's still there." The timestamp on the message was 1:52 a.m., almost 2 hours after I'd first seen him. 3 to 7 and I stared at each other. "That's not possible," he whispered. I pulled out my own phone and refreshed the forum. Another post had just appeared. State police checked mile marker 63 overpass at approximately 2:10 a.m. No subject found. No vehicles. No footprints. But here's the weird part, they found a pile of old clothes on the bridge. Arranged to look like a person. Dark jacket. Jeans. Positioned near the railing. My stomach dropped. 3 to 7 leaned back in his seat. Clothes? We both saw a person. A man. Moving. Waving. I know, I said quietly. The waitress came over with the coffee pot. You boys look like you've seen a ghost. Neither of us responded. She refilled our cups and walked away. I scrolled further down the forum. An older post from 3 months ago caught my eye. Warning to drivers on I-81 southbound near mile marker 63. There's been multiple reports of a man on an overpass waving down trucks late at night. Do not stop. At least 2 drivers who stopped to help have reported strange experiences. Missing time, mechanical failures, disorientation. One driver said when he got out to check, there was no one there. Just clothes arranged to look like a person. I showed the post to 3 to 7. He read it slowly, his hands trembling. What the hell is this? He muttered. I didn't have an answer. We sat there in silence for a long time, drinking coffee, watching the empty highway through the diner window. Finally, 3 to 7 stood up and dropped a few bills on the counter. I'm taking a different route from now on. I don't care if it adds an hour. I'm not driving past that bridge again. I nodded. Same. He walked out into the parking lot, and I watched his truck pull back onto the highway, heading south. I finished my coffee and paid the bill. As I walked back to my truck, my phone buzzed. Another post in the forum. Just drove past mile marker 63. 3:15 a.m. He's still there. Still waving. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I turned off my phone, climbed into my cab, and took the long way to Virginia. Some roads have ghosts. Some have accidents. Some have bad weather. But some roads have something worse. They have traps. And once you see the bait, you can never unsee it. West Virginia has a way of making you feel small. The mountains rise up on both sides of the highway like the walls of a canyon, and the overpasses, those old steel structures that cut across the valleys, look like the skeletons of giant creatures frozen in time. I've been running this route for 6 years, hauling auto parts from Charleston to Pittsburgh, and I thought I knew every mile of it. It was a Tuesday night in late October, the kind of night where the fog rolls in thick and low, clinging to the asphalt like a living thing. I left Charleston just after 10 p.m., planning to make Pittsburgh by dawn. The highway was quiet, just a few scattered cars and the occasional truck passing in the opposite direction. By the time I hit the stretch near Beckley, it was past 3 a.m. This section of I-77 has a series of old steel overpasses, built back in the 50s when they were trying to connect the coal towns to the rest of the country. They're narrow, rusted, and covered in decades of grime. Most of them don't even have lights anymore. I was running on autopilot, sipping cold coffee from a thermos, when I heard the first thump. It was loud, heavy, like someone had dropped a 50-pound sandbag onto my roof from a height. I jumped in my seat, nearly spilling coffee all over myself. My first thought was that something had fallen off the overpass I just passed under. Maybe a chunk of concrete or a piece of metal. It happens sometimes on these old bridges. I slowed down, checking my mirrors for debris on the road behind me. Nothing. Just empty highway disappearing into the fog. Then I heard it again. Thump. This time it was further back, toward the rear of my trailer. I eased off the gas pedal, coasting down to about 30 miles per hour. My eyes kept darting between the road ahead and the mirrors. Whatever had hit my truck, it was big, and it had hit hard enough to make the whole cab shake. Then came the third thump, and the fourth, and the fifth. They weren't random. They were rhythmic, evenly spaced, like footsteps. Someone or something was walking across the top of my trailer. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel. I told myself to stay calm, stay rational. Maybe it was ice breaking off the roof. Maybe it was cargo shifting inside the trailer. Maybe it was thump, thump, thump. The footsteps moved forward, slowly, deliberately, from the back of the trailer toward the cab. I could hear them clearly now over the rumble of the engine. Heavy, methodical, getting closer with each step. I grabbed my CB radio with trembling hands. Breaker 1 to 9. This is driver 6 to 3 northbound on I-77 near Beckley. I've got a 10 to 33 emergency. Someone is on top of my trailer. Repeat, someone is walking on my trailer. Over. Static hissed through the speaker. I tried again. No response. The fog must have been interfering with the signal. The footsteps reached the front of the trailer, right behind my cab. Then they stopped. Silence. I sat there, frozen, staring at the road ahead. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Sweat dripped down my back despite the cold October air. Then I heard a new sound. Scraping. Metal on metal. Something was climbing down from the trailer onto the cab. I could hear it clearly, nails or claws dragging across the steel roof. Finding purchase. Moving slowly. That's when I made my decision. I hit the brakes and pulled off onto the shoulder. Gravel crunched under the tires as I came to a stop. I killed the engine and sat there in the sudden silence. Listening. Nothing. I grabbed my mag light from the passenger seat, a big, heavy-duty flashlight that doubles as a weapon if you need it to, and kicked open the door. The fog was so thick I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. The overhead lights on the truck cut through it in weak yellow beams. "Hey!" I shouted into the darkness. "I don't know who you are, but you need to get off my truck right now, or I'm calling the cops." No answer. I walked around to the side of the trailer, shining my light up at the roof. I couldn't see anything from ground level. If someone was up there, they were staying low. "I'm serious. Get down here." Still nothing. I looked around for something to climb on. There was a maintenance access panel on the side of the trailer with built-in ladder rungs. I hesitated for a moment, then started climbing. The metal was cold and slick with condensation. I climbed slowly, one hand gripping the flashlight, the other holding the rungs. When I reached the top, I hoisted myself up and shined the light across the roof. What I saw made my stomach drop. Handprints, dozens of them, covering the entire surface of the trailer roof. They were muddy, fresh, still wet, small prints, child-sized, pressed into the metal like someone had walked across it with bare hands and feet, crawling on all fours. But that wasn't the worst part. The prints didn't follow any logical pattern. They weren't in neat rows or tracks. They were chaotic, overlapping, crisscrossing. Some were facing forward, some backward, some were sideways like whoever or whatever made them had been moving in impossible directions. I crouched down and touched one of the prints with my finger. Smeared, thick, cold. The mud was fresh, real. But there was no mud on the road. No rain, no puddles. I'd been driving through dry highway for hours. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling, and scanned the roof with my flashlight. The prints led to the front of the trailer, right up to the edge where it connected to my cab. Then they stopped, as if whatever made them had climbed down. I scrambled back down the ladder so fast I nearly fell. I hit the ground hard, stumbled, and ran back to the cab. I locked the doors, started the engine, and floored it back onto the highway. I didn't care about the handprints. I didn't care about evidence. I just needed to get out of there. I drove for 2 hours straight without stopping. The sun was starting to rise when I finally pulled into a truck stop outside of Pittsburgh. I got out, grabbed a rag, and climbed back up to the roof to wipe off the prints before anyone saw them. But when I got up there, the roof was clean, completely clean. No mud, no handprints, nothing. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined the whole thing, that I'd been hallucinating from exhaustion. But then I noticed something that made my blood freeze. On the front edge of the trailer, right where the prints had stopped, there were 5 deep scratches gouged into the metal. Long, thin, claw-like, still fresh. I climbed down and walked into the truck stop diner, my hands still shaking. I ordered coffee and sat at the counter, trying to process what had happened. An older driver sat down next to me, grizzled, weathered. the kind of guy who'd been on the road for 30 years. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, half joking. I didn't respond. I just stared into my coffee. He chuckled and took a sip of his own. "Let me guess. You were running through Beckley last night, on I-77. I looked up sharply. "How did you know?" He set down his cup and turned to face me. His expression was serious now. "You heard the footsteps, didn't you? On your roof." I nodded slowly. He sighed and rubbed his face. "You're the fourth driver this year. It's always the same stretch of highway. Always between 2 and 4 a.m. Always the same sound. Footsteps. And always the same handprints. What the hell is it?" The old driver looked out the window, watching the sunrise. "Back in 1974, there was a school bus that went off one of those overpasses. 23 kids on board. Driver lost control in the fog. The bus rolled down the embankment and into the river. They recovered most of the bodies, but not all of them." He paused, then looked back at me. "Some folks say the kids are still out there, trying to hitch a ride home, trying to get back to their families. And every now and then, when the fog rolls in thick enough, they find a truck passing through." I didn't say anything. I just sat there, staring at my coffee. "My advice?" the old driver said, standing up and dropping a few bills on the counter. "Don't run that route at night anymore. And if you do, don't stop, no matter what you hear on your roof. Because if you stop..." He trailed off. "What?" I asked. "What happens if you stop?" He looked at me one last time before walking toward the door. "Then they know you can see them. And once they know that, they'll never leave you alone." He walked out into the morning light, leaving me alone with my coffee and the memory of those small, muddy handprints covering my trailer. I quit that route the next day. Some roads aren't meant to be driven at night, and some passengers aren't meant to be picked up. S 3.2. Arizona's I-10 is one of those highways that feels like it goes on forever. Flat, barren, nothing but desert scrub and distant mountains for miles in every direction. During the day, the heat shimmers off the asphalt in waves, making the horizon look like it's melting. But at night, it's different. The temperature drops, the stars come out by the thousands, and the highway becomes a straight black line cutting through an ocean of darkness. I'd been hauling electronics from Phoenix to El Paso for the past 3 years. It was a good route, steady pay, reliable schedule, minimal traffic. The only downside was the isolation. Between Tucson and the New Mexico border, there's a 90-mile stretch where you might not see another vehicle for half an hour. No gas stations, no rest stops, just you, the road, and the vast emptiness of the Sonoran Desert. It was a Wednesday night in early November. I'd left Phoenix around 10 p.m., planning to make El Paso by sunrise. The cab was warm, the radio was playing classic rock, and I was making good time. The moon was nearly full, casting everything in a pale silver light. Around 4 a.m., I passed through a small town called Wilcox. After that, the highway became even more desolate. The overpasses out here are few and far between, maybe one every 10 or 15 miles, connecting ranch roads to the interstate. Most of them are old concrete structures, built decades ago and barely maintained. I was cruising along at about 70 miles per hour when I saw the overpass ahead. It stood out because there was absolutely nothing around it. No buildings, no signs, no lights, just a lonely bridge crossing the highway in the middle of nowhere. As I got closer, I noticed something moving on top of it. A shadow, a silhouette. Someone was standing up there. I frowned. It was 4 a.m. in the middle of the Arizona desert. What was anyone doing on an overpass at this hour? Before I could process it further, the figure moved, and something fell. It dropped from the overpass and hit the road directly in front of my truck. I slammed on the brakes. The truck's tires screamed against the asphalt. The trailer fishtailed slightly. My heart lurched into my throat as I fought to keep control. The truck came to a shuddering stop about 50 feet past the object. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard, my hands locked on the steering wheel. The cab was filled with the smell of burned rubber and hot brakes. What the hell was that? I grabbed my flashlight, checked my mirrors to make sure no one was coming up behind me, and climbed out of the cab. The desert air was cold and still. My boots crunched on the gravel shoulder as I walked back toward the object lying in the middle of the road. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping back and forth. When I reached it, I stopped cold. It was a mannequin, full-sized, wearing what looked like a trucker's uniform, a flannel shirt, jeans, work boots, and a baseball cap. It was lying face down on the asphalt, arms and legs splayed out like it had been dropped from a great height. The impact had shattered it. The head was cracked open, revealing stuffing, newspaper, rags, bits of cloth packed tightly inside the hollow body. I crouched down, shining my light over it. The clothing was old, worn, stained with dirt and something darker, something that looked like oil or grease. The boots were scuffed and cracked, like they'd been worn for years. But it was the smell that made my stomach turn. It smelled like rot, like something organic had been stuffed inside it and left to decompose. The stench was faint but unmistakable, sweet, cloying, and wrong. I stood up quickly, covering my nose with my sleeve. I looked back at the overpass, shining my light up at the bridge. No one was there. The road in both directions was empty. No cars, no trucks, no sign of whoever had dropped this thing. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. It rang twice before a dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency? Yeah, hi. I'm a truck driver on I-10 eastbound, about 15 miles past Wilcox. Someone just dropped a mannequin off an overpass onto the highway. It almost caused an accident. I need to report it. There was a pause. A mannequin, sir? Yeah, life-sized, dressed like a person. Someone dropped it deliberately. I saw them on the bridge. Are you injured? No, I'm fine. But this is dangerous. If another truck comes through here going full speed. Understood, sir. I'm dispatching a unit to your location. Can you stay with the object until they arrive? I looked down at the shattered mannequin, at the stuffing spilling out onto the road, and felt a deep unease crawl up my spine. Yeah, I said slowly. I'll stay. Thank you. A unit should be there within 20 minutes. I hung up and stood there in the middle of the highway, my flashlight trained on the mannequin. The wind picked up slightly, making the torn fabric of its shirt flutter. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was writing on the back of the shirt. I crouched down again, leaning closer, and read the words scrawled in black marker across the flannel. Wrong turn. My blood went cold. I stood up and backed away from the mannequin, my heart pounding. I swept my flashlight across the overpass again, then up and down the highway. Still nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I dragged the mannequin to the shoulder of the road, trying to ignore the smell and the way the stuffing felt damp and cold under my hands. Once it was clear of the lane, I walked back to my truck and sat in the cab with the doors locked, waiting for the police. The minutes dragged by. 4:15 a.m., 4:20 a.m., 4:25 a.m. Finally, I saw headlights approaching from the west. An Arizona Highway Patrol car pulled up behind my truck, lights flashing. A tall, thin officer stepped out and walked over to my window. I rolled it down. You the one who called this in? He asked. Yeah, it's over there on the shoulder. He walked over to the mannequin and crouched down, shining his own flashlight over it. After a moment, he stood up and walked back to my truck. You said someone dropped this off the bridge? That's right. I saw a figure up there. They dropped it right in front of me. The officer looked up at the overpass, then back at me. His expression was hard to read. Did you see what they looked like? What kind of vehicle they were driving? No, it was too dark. I just saw a silhouette. He nodded slowly. All right, we'll take it from here. You're free to go. I hesitated. What about the person who dropped it? Are you going to? We'll investigate, he said curtly. You can go. Something in his tone told me he wanted me gone. Fast. I started my engine and pulled back onto the highway. In my side mirror, I watched the officer drag the mannequin toward his patrol car. I drove for another hour before stopping at a truck stop in Lordsburg, New Mexico. I needed coffee. I needed to calm down. I needed to convince myself that what had just happened was real and not some sleep-deprived hallucination. Inside the diner, I sat at the counter and ordered coffee and eggs. The place was nearly empty except for a few other drivers scattered in booths. An older man sitting 2 stools down turned to me. He had a weathered face and a trucker's cap that looked like it had seen 1,000 miles. "You look rattled, son," he said. I laughed bitterly. "You could say that. Let me guess. 10. Somewhere between Wilcox and the border." I looked at him sharply. "How did you know?" He took a sip of his coffee. "Because you're not the first driver to call in a mannequin on that stretch of road. It's happened 4 times in the last 6 months." My stomach dropped. 4 times? He nodded. "Always the same. A mannequin dressed like a trucker. Dropped from an overpass in the middle of the night. Always stuffed with rags and newspaper. And always with some kind of message written on it." "Mine said wrong turn," I whispered. The old man's face darkened. "The others had different messages. Keep going. Don't stop. You're next." "What the hell does it mean?" He set down his cup and looked me straight in the eye. "No one knows. But here's the thing, every driver who reported it said the same thing. They saw someone on the overpass. But when the cops checked, there was no one there. No footprints. No tire tracks. Nothing. That doesn't make sense." "I know. But here's what really bothers me." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "One of those drivers, guy named Ricky Hollis, he picked up the mannequin and brought it with him to the next truck stop. Thought it was some kind of prank. Wanted to show people. And they found his truck 3 days later, parked on the side of I-10, about 100 miles east of where he picked it up. Engine off. Doors locked. But Ricky was gone. Just vanished. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The only thing they found inside the cab," the old man continued, "was the mannequin, sitting in the driver's seat, wearing Ricky's jacket. And there was a new message written on the back of the shirt." "What did it say?" The old man's eyes were grim. He stopped. I didn't sleep that night. I drove straight through to El Paso, delivered my load, and took a week off before I got back on the road. I never drove through that section of I-10 at night again. And whenever I pass an overpass in the dark, I don't slow down. Because whatever's up there, dropping those mannequins, leaving those messages, it's not a prank. It's a warning. And some warnings are better left unread. Rural Missouri has a particular kind of darkness that swallows everything whole. No city lights, no street lamps, just endless stretches of farmland, forests, and forgotten towns connected by 2-lane highways that haven't been updated since the 1970s. I'd been hauling agricultural equipment through this part of the state for 5 years, and I thought I knew every mile of these roads. It was a Friday night in late March. I'd picked up a load of tractor parts in Springfield and was heading northeast toward Columbia. The route took me through some of the most isolated parts of the Ozark region, winding roads that cut through dense forests and crossed over ravines on narrow, crumbling overpasses. I left Springfield around 11 p.m., planning to make Columbia by 3 a.m. The weather was clear, and the roads were empty, just the way I liked it. Less traffic meant fewer idiots to deal with and better time. By 1:30 a.m., I was deep in the backcountry, following Route 32 through a stretch of forest so thick that my headlights barely penetrated the darkness beyond the road. The only sound was the rumble of my diesel engine and the occasional creak of my trailer as it swayed on the uneven pavement. That's when I saw the overpass ahead. It was old, really old. Built sometime in the 60s, probably. Just a narrow 2-lane bridge that crossed over the highway, connecting one forest road to another. The concrete was stained and cracked, covered in moss and decades of grime. There were no lights, no reflectors, just a dark, looming structure cutting across the road. As I approached, doing about 50 miles per hour, I checked my mirrors out of habit. No one behind me, no one ahead. I was completely alone. I passed under the bridge, and that's when I heard it. A scream. Not just any scream. The most blood-curdling, raw, primal scream I'd ever heard in my life. A woman's voice, high-pitched, desperate, full of absolute terror, came from directly above me. I slammed on the brakes so hard that my trailer lurched forward, nearly jackknifing. The truck screeched to a stop about 100 feet past the overpass. My hands were shaking on the wheel. My heart was hammering in my chest. What the hell was that? I sat there for a moment, engine idling, trying to process what I just heard. It had been so loud, so close, like someone was being murdered right above my cab. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? Yeah, I just heard a woman screaming. I'm on Route 32, about 10 miles west of Lebanon. There's an overpass here, and I heard someone screaming from the top of it. Sounded bad. Really bad. Can you describe the location more specifically, sir? I looked around, trying to find any kind of landmark. There was nothing, just trees and darkness. I don't know. There's no mile marker. It's just an old overpass in the middle of nowhere. But someone's up there. Someone needs help. Okay, sir. I'm dispatching units to your location. Can you stay where you are? Yeah, I'll stay. Are you in a safe location? I looked around. The road was empty in both directions. The forest pressed in on either side, dark and impenetrable. I think so. I'm in my truck. Doors are locked. Good. Stay in your vehicle. Officers should be there in approximately 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Out here, that might as well be an hour. Okay, I said, but you need to hurry. That scream, it sounded like someone was being hurt. Bad. Units are on their way, sir. Please stay on the line. I kept the phone pressed to my ear, my eyes locked on the overpass in my rearview mirror. The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking me questions about what I'd heard, trying to keep me calm. And then it happened again. Another scream, louder this time, closer, so loud that I could hear it clearly even inside my locked cab with the windows up. Jesus Christ, I shouted into the phone. Did you hear that? Sir, I need you to stay calm. It's happening again. Someone's up there. You need to send someone now. Officers are en route, sir. Please stay in your vehicle. The scream came a third time, but this time it wasn't coming from the overpass. It was coming from under my trailer. I dropped the phone. My entire body went rigid. The scream echoed from somewhere beneath my truck. A horrible, wailing shriek that didn't sound entirely human anymore. It was too raw, too distorted, like vocal cords being shredded. I grabbed my flashlight and kicked open the door. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I stepped out onto the pavement, my legs shaking, and shined the light under my trailer. Nothing, just the undercarriage, the axles, empty road. The screaming stopped. Silence fell over the highway like a blanket. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the ticking of my cooling engine. I stood there, flashlight beams sweeping back and forth under the truck, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Hello, I called out, my voice cracking. Is someone there? Do you need help? No answer. I walked slowly around my truck, checking every side, shining my light into the darkness beyond the road. The forest stared back at me, black and impenetrable. Nothing. I picked up my phone from where I dropped it inside the cab. The dispatcher was still on the line, her voice urgent. Sir, are you there? Yeah, I said hoarsely. I'm here. What happened? You went silent. The screaming. It was under my truck. But there's no one here. There's nothing here. There was a pause. Sir, I need you to get back in your vehicle and lock the doors. Right now. Something in her tone made my blood run cold. She knew something. Something she wasn't telling me. What's going on? I demanded. What is this place? Please, sir, get back in your truck. Now. I climbed back into the cab and locked the doors. My hands were still shaking. I sat there in the darkness, waiting, watching the overpass in my mirrors. 15 minutes later, I saw flashing lights approaching from the east. 2 patrol cars pulled up, one in front of my truck and one behind. 4 officers got out, flashlights and hands on their weapons. One of them walked up to my window. I rolled it down. "You're the one who called it in?" he asked. "Yeah." I heard screaming. From the overpass. And then from under my truck. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. "Did you see anyone?" "No. Just heard it." He nodded slowly. "All right, we're going to check the overpass. I need you to stay here." I watched as the officers walked back toward the bridge, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They climbed up the embankment and onto the overpass, searching the area. After about 10 minutes, they came back down. The lead officer returned to my window. His face was grim. "There's no one up there," he said. "No signs of a struggle. No footprints. Nothing. But I heard it. I heard her screaming." "I believe you, sir. But there's nothing there." "What do you mean you believe me?" "Either someone was there or they weren't." The officer hesitated. He looked back at his partners, then leaned in closer to my window. "This isn't the first report we've had from this overpass," he said quietly. "In the last 6 months, we've had 4 separate calls, all between midnight and 3 a.m., all reporting the same thing. A woman screaming. My mouth went dry. And we've investigated every time. And every time there's no one there. No evidence. Nothing. Then what is it?" He glanced back at the overpass, his jaw tight. "There was an incident here in 2011. A woman named Sarah Kendrick. She was driving home late at night when her car broke down near this overpass. She called for help, but before anyone could get to her, she was attacked." "Attacked by who?" "They never found out. Someone dragged her off the road and into the woods. By the time officers arrived, she was gone. They searched for days, weeks. Eventually, they found her body about half a mile into the forest." He paused, his expression dark. "The coroner said she'd been alive for hours after she was taken, screaming for help. But no one heard her. No one came. I felt sick." "Are you saying that's her?" "That's what I'm hearing." The officer straightened up. "I'm not saying anything, sir. I'm just telling you what happened. What I am saying is that you need to move along. Don't stop here again. Not at night. Not ever." "But what if someone really needs help?" "What if? If someone really needs help," he interrupted, "they'll call 911. But whatever you heard tonight, it wasn't someone who needs help. Not anymore." He stepped back from my truck and gestured toward the road ahead. "Go. Now." I didn't argue. I started my engine, put the truck in gear, and drove. I didn't look back at the overpass. I didn't stop until I reached Columbia. 3 hours later, as the sun was coming up, I told other drivers about it at the truck stop. Most of them didn't believe me, thought I was making it up or had fallen asleep at the wheel and dreamed it. But one old driver, sitting in the corner with a cup of coffee, looked up when I mentioned Route 32. "The screaming overpass," he said quietly. I turned to him. "You've heard of it?" He nodded. "I drove that route back in 2012, right after that woman was killed. I heard it too. The screaming scared the hell out of me. I called it in just like you. And just like you, they found nothing. What do you think it is?" He took a sip of his coffee and stared out the window at the rising sun. "I think some sounds don't fade," he said. "Some screams get trapped. In the air. In the ground. In the bones of the place where they happened. And every now and then, when the conditions are right, they play back. Like a recording stuck on repeat." He looked at me with tired, haunted eyes. "And the worst part? No one can answer them. No one can save her. Because she's already gone. I never drove Route 32 at night again. And whenever I pass an overpass in the dark, I turn up my radio. Because some sounds, once you hear them, you can never unhear. And some screams are meant to be ignored." Interstate 65 cuts through Kentucky like a vein, connecting Louisville to Nashville through rolling hills and farmland. It's a busy highway during the day. Families heading to vacation, salesmen making their rounds, and trucks like mine hauling everything from furniture to food. But at night, especially in the stretch between Bowling Green and Elizabethtown, it becomes something different. The traffic thins out. The exits get farther apart. and the overpasses, those old, graffiti-covered bridges, start to feel like monuments to something forgotten. I'd been running this route for 8 years, hauling automotive parts from Louisville to Nashville and back. It was a good gig, steady hours, decent pay, and I knew every mile of I-65 like the back of my hand. It was a Tuesday night in early April. I'd left Louisville around midnight with a full load, planning to make Nashville by 5 a.m. The weather was clear, and the roads were quiet, just the way I liked it. Around 2 a.m., I was approaching the stretch near Munfordville. The highway here runs through a series of low hills, with old concrete overpasses connecting back roads to the interstate. Most of them are narrow, built decades ago when traffic was lighter. They're covered in faded graffiti, names, dates, crude drawings, the kind of stuff kids spray paint when they're bored and have nowhere else to go. As I came up on one of these overpasses, my headlights caught something hanging from the railing. At first, I thought it was a tarp or maybe a piece of canvas that had blown up there during a storm. But as I got closer, the shape became clearer. It looked like a person, a human figure hanging from the bridge by what appeared to be a rope or cable. Arms dangling, legs limp, head slumped forward. My heart jumped into my throat. My first instinct was to hit the brakes, call 911, try to help. But something made me hesitate. The way it was hanging didn't look right. The proportions were off. Too stiff, too symmetrical, like a mannequin or a scarecrow. I slowed down to about 40 miles per hour as I passed under the bridge. I looked up through my windshield, trying to get a better view. It was a dummy, full-sized, dressed in what looked like a reflective safety vest, the kind road workers wear, and a pair of jeans. Work boots dangled from its feet. Its arms hung straight down, swaying slightly in the wind. But it was the face that made my skin crawl. It was painted, stark white, with hollow black circles for eyes and a wide, blood-red smile stretched across its face like a Glasgow grin. I exhaled slowly, my hands loosening on the wheel. Just a prank. Some kids with too much time on their hands trying to scare passing drivers. Still, something about it bothered me. The location was so isolated. There were no houses nearby, no schools, no reason for anyone to be out here in the middle of the night. I grabbed my CB radio and keyed the mic. Breaker 1 to 9. This is driver 7 to 5 southbound on I-65 near Munfordville. Just past an overpass with a dummy hanging from it. Looks like a prank, but someone should probably remove it before it causes an accident. Over. Static crackled. Then a voice responded. Copy that, 7 to 5. Can you give me a mile marker? I glanced at the last marker I'd passed. Mile marker 71, I think. Maybe 72. It's one of those old overpasses with graffiti on it. Roger. I'll report it. Thanks for the heads up. I set down the mic and continued driving, trying to shake off the image of that grinning face. 20 minutes later, my radio crackled again. Breaker, breaker. This is driver 2 to 8 southbound on I-65. Anyone else see that dummy hanging from the overpass near Munfordville? I grabbed the mic. Yeah, 2 to 8. I called it in about 20 minutes ago. Dispatch knows about it. Did you notice which way it was facing? I frowned. What do you mean? The dummy. Which direction was it facing? North or south? I don't know. I guess it was facing south. Toward me. Why? There was a long pause. Because I just passed it. And it's facing north now. My blood went cold. Say again, 2 to 8? I'm serious, man. I just drove under that bridge 2 minutes ago. The dummy is facing the opposite direction now. Like it turned around. I glanced at my clock. It had been exactly 23 minutes since I'd passed the overpass. There was no way someone could have climbed up there, taken down the dummy, and repositioned it in that amount of time. Not in the middle of the night. Not without a vehicle. Are you sure it's the same overpass? I asked. Positive. Mile marker 71. Old concrete bridge. Covered in graffiti. And that thing is still hanging there. But it's definitely facing the other way now. I felt a chill run down my spine. Did you call it in? I'm about to. But I wanted to see if anyone else noticed it first. I set down the mic and stared at the dark highway ahead of me. My mind was racing. Maybe it was a different dummy. Maybe there were two of them. Or maybe the wind had spun it around. But even as I thought it, I knew it didn't make sense. The dummy had been hanging by what looked like a rope or cable. There wasn't enough give for it to spin a full 180 degrees. I tried to put it out of my mind and focus on the road. But 20 minutes later, my radio crackled again. This time it was a different voice. Older. Gruff. "This is driver 921. I just passed mile marker 71 on I-65. That dummy y'all were talking about? It's gone." I grabbed the mic so fast I almost dropped it. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "I mean it's not there anymore. I saw your posts on the CB and was watching for it. But when I went under the bridge, there was nothing. Just an empty overpass." "That's impossible," I said. "I passed it less than an hour ago. I'm telling you, man, it's gone." But here's the weird part. There's a rope still tied to the railing, hanging down, like someone cut the dummy loose and left the rope behind. My stomach twisted. "And it's swinging," he added quietly, "like someone just touched it." I pulled into a truck stop in Elizabethtown about an hour later. I needed coffee. I needed to clear my head. I needed to convince myself that what I'd heard on the radio was just a series of coincidences. But I couldn't shake the image of that painted face, those hollow black eyes, that red smile. I parked, killed the engine, and walked into the diner. It was nearly empty, just a waitress behind the counter and a couple of other drivers sitting in booths. I ordered coffee and sat down, pulling out my phone. I searched online for I-65 Kentucky hanging dummy overpass. A few old forum posts came up, but nothing recent. I tried different variations. Still nothing. Then I found it. A news article from 2019. Local paper. Small story buried in the back pages. Prank gone wrong. Dummy found hanging from I-65 overpass. I clicked on it and read, "Authorities removed a life-size dummy from an overpass on Interstate 65 near Munfordville on Tuesday night after multiple drivers reported seeing what they believed to be a person hanging from the bridge. Upon investigation, state police determined it was a mannequin dressed in a reflective vest and work clothing, with a painted face. No suspects have been identified, and the incident is being treated as a prank. However, police are urging anyone with information to come forward, as the dummy's placement could have caused serious accidents." I scrolled down to the comments section. Most of them were people expressing outrage or making jokes. But one comment, posted by someone with the username NightDriver77, caught my eye. "This isn't the first time. I've been driving I-65 for 20 years, and I've seen that dummy at least 3 times. Always the same overpass. Always between 1 and 3 a.m. And every time I report it, the cops say they can't find it. But I know what I saw, and so do the other drivers who've seen it." There were replies beneath it. Other drivers sharing similar experiences. Some said the dummy appeared and disappeared. Others said it changed positions. One driver claimed he saw it waving at him as he passed underneath. I set down my phone and took a long sip of coffee, my hands trembling slightly. A voice behind me made me jump. "You saw it too, didn't you?" I turned around. An older man was sitting in the booth behind me. Weathered face, gray beard, trucker's cap pulled low over his eyes. "Saw what?" I asked. "The dummy, on the overpass near Munfordville." I stared at him. "How did you know?" He gestured to my phone. "Because you're doing the same thing every other driver does after they see it. Searching online, trying to figure out if they're crazy." "Are you saying you've seen it too?" He nodded. "Twice. Once in 2017. Once last year. Same bridge. Same dummy. Same painted face. Do you know what it is? Who's putting it there?" He took a sip of his coffee and looked out the window at the dark highway. "Nobody's putting it there," he said quietly. "What?" "Nobody's putting it there. It just appears, and then it disappears. No one knows why. No one knows how. But it's been happening for years." "That doesn't make any sense." "I know. But here's what I do know." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "In 1987, A road worker named Daniel Briggs was killed on that overpass. He was working a night shift, repairing the railing, when a drunk driver swerved and hit him, knocked him right off the bridge. He was wearing a reflective vest and a hard hat. They found his body in the ditch below. I felt my skin prickle. Ever since then, the old man continued, drivers have reported seeing things on that bridge, a figure standing on the railing, a man in a reflective vest waving for help, and sometimes a dummy hanging from the bridge, dressed just like Daniel was the night he died. You're saying it's a ghost? I'm saying it's something that doesn't want to be forgotten. And every now and then, it reminds us that it's still there. He stood up, dropped a few bills on the table, and adjusted his cap. My advice? Don't go looking for it. Don't stop if you see it again. And don't try to make sense of it. Because the more you think about it, the more it gets under your skin. He walked out of the diner, leaving me alone with my coffee and my thoughts. I sat there for a long time, staring at the article on my phone. Then I deleted my search history, finished my coffee, and walked back to my truck. I drove the rest of the route in silence. No radio, no CB chatter, just the hum of the engine and the dark highway stretching out ahead of me. When I passed mile marker 71 on my way back north the next night, I kept my eyes straight ahead. I didn't look at the overpass. I didn't slow down, and I didn't see anything. But as I drove past, I heard something on my CB radio, a burst of static, and then faintly, almost too quiet to hear, a single word, help. I turned off the radio and didn't turn it back on until I crossed the state line. Some roads have history, some have tragedy, and some have things that refuse to stay buried. I still drive I-65, but I don't drive it at night anymore. Not past mile marker 71. Never again. The Ozark Mountains are beautiful during the day. Rolling hills covered in dense forest, limestone bluffs, crystal clear streams cutting through the valleys. But at night, they become something else entirely. The darkness here is absolute. The kind of darkness that makes you feel like you're driving through the belly of some sleeping giant, hoping it doesn't wake up. I'd been hauling lumber through the Ozarks for 3 years, running routes between Missouri and Arkansas. Most of the highways are winding 2-lane roads that snake through the mountains, passing over ravines and through valleys. And every so often, you'll come across one of those old covered overpasses, concrete tunnels built in the 60s to carry roads over the highway without switchbacks. It was a Thursday night in late May. I'd picked up a load of hardwood in Mountain Home, Arkansas, and was heading north toward Springfield, Missouri. The route took me along Highway 65, a narrow road that cuts through some of the deepest parts of the Ozarks. I left Mountain Home around 11 p.m. The night was clear, warm, and eerily quiet. No traffic, no wind, just the steady rumble of my diesel engine and the glow of my headlights cutting through the darkness. Around 1:30 a.m., I approached the covered overpass near the Arkansas-Missouri border. I'd driven through it dozens of times before. It was about 100 feet long, a concrete tunnel with a low ceiling and narrow lanes. The walls were stained with decades of exhaust and moisture. The road inside was cracked and uneven. As I entered the tunnel, I heard my engine echo back at me. That was normal. The sound of a diesel engine bouncing off concrete walls always creates that deep, rumbling echo. But then I heard something else. Another engine. Same pitch, same rhythm, same diesel growl. Like another truck was driving right behind me. I glanced at my side mirrors. Nothing. Just empty tunnel behind me, lit by my taillights. But the sound didn't stop. Kept pace with me. When I accelerated slightly, it accelerated. When I eased off the gas, it eased off too. I frowned and checked my mirrors again. Still nothing. Maybe it was just the acoustics of the tunnel playing tricks on me. Echoes could be weird in enclosed spaces. I'd heard of drivers experiencing auditory illusions in long tunnels before. I tried to ignore it and focus on the road ahead. The exit of the tunnel was about 50 feet away, a circle of darkness framed by the concrete walls. But the second engine sound was getting louder, closer, like whatever was making it was gaining on me. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I pressed down harder on the accelerator. My truck surged forward, the speedometer climbing from 45 to 55 miles per hour. The echo matched my speed exactly. I could hear it clearly now, not just an echo, but a distinct engine sound. A separate vehicle, right behind me, so close I should have been able to see its headlights in my mirrors. But there was nothing there. I burst out of the tunnel and into the open night air. I immediately checked all my mirrors, craning my neck to look behind me. The road was empty. No headlights, no vehicle, nothing. But the sound continued for another 3 seconds after I exited the tunnel. I could hear it clearly, that diesel rumble, that mechanical growl, before it suddenly cut off. Dead silence. I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder, my heart pounding in my chest. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard, staring at the tunnel entrance in my mirrors. What the hell was that? I grabbed my CB radio and keyed the mic, my voice shaky. Breaker 1 to 9. This is driver 4 to 6 northbound on Highway 65 near the Missouri border. Anyone else on this route tonight? Over. Static. I tried again. This is driver 4 to 6. Is anyone out there? Over. More static. Then, finally, a faint voice broke through. This is driver 3 to 3 southbound. I'm about 20 miles north of you. What's going on? 4 to 6. I just went through that covered overpass near the state line. Did you pass through there earlier tonight? Yeah, about an hour ago. Why? Did you hear anything weird? Like another engine. There was a pause. What kind of engine? Like another truck, running right behind you. But when you look, there's nothing there. The pause was longer this time. I didn't hear anything like that, he said finally. But I had my radio turned up pretty loud. Why? What happened? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'm just tired. You want me to turn around and meet you somewhere? No, I'm fine. Thanks. All right, man. Be safe out there. The radio went silent. I sat there for another minute trying to calm my nerves. Then I put the truck in gear and continued north. I drove for another 30 minutes, putting distance between myself and that tunnel. The highway was empty. The night was quiet. Everything seemed normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Around 2:15 a.m., I pulled into a rest area to use the bathroom and stretch my legs. The lot was empty except for one other truck parked in the far corner. I killed my engine and climbed out. The night air was cool and still. I walked around to the back of my trailer to check the straps on my load. Everything looked secure. That's when I noticed it. My trailer door was open. Not wide open, just slightly ajar. Maybe 6 inches. Enough to see darkness inside. My stomach dropped. I knew I'd locked that door. I always locked it. Every single time. I pulled out my flashlight and walked slowly toward the back of the trailer. My hand was shaking as I reached for the handle and pulled the door open wide. The beam of my flashlight swept across the interior. One of my pallets had been moved. It was supposed to be in the middle of the trailer, secured with straps. But now it was pushed all the way to the front, right behind the cab. And sitting on top of it was a pair of work boots. Old, scuffed, caked in dried mud. Still warm. I backed away from the trailer so fast I nearly tripped. My flashlight beam stayed locked on those boots. They were sitting there neatly, side by side, toes pointing toward me, like someone had just taken them off and set them down. I reached out and touched one with my finger. Warm. Not hot, but warm. Like someone had been wearing them recently. My mind raced. Someone had been in my trailer. Someone had climbed in while I was driving. But when? How? Then it hit me. The tunnel. That's why I heard the second engine. That's why it sounded so close. Because someone or something had been on my truck. On the roof. Or clinging to the side. And when I came out of the tunnel, they climbed inside. I spun around, shining my flashlight across the rest area. The parking lot was still empty. The other truck in the corner sat dark and silent. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 with trembling hands. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at a rest area on Highway 65, just north of the Arkansas border. Someone broke into my trailer. I think they might still be nearby. Are you in immediate danger, sir? I don't know. I stopped. How was I supposed to explain this? I found a pair of boots in my trailer. They're still warm, like someone just left them there. Just boots. Yes, but my trailer door was open. I know I locked it. Someone was inside. Okay, sir. I'm dispatching officers to your location. Can you stay in your cab with the doors locked until they arrive? Yeah, I can do that. I hung up and climbed back into my cab, locking every door. I sat there, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other, watching the trailer door in my side mirror. 15 minutes later, 2 state police cruisers pulled into the rest area. 3 officers got out and approached my truck. I rolled down my window. "You're the one who called about the break-in?" one of them asked. "Yes, sir. The trailer door was open, and there's a pair of boots inside that weren't there before." They exchanged glances. "Can you open it up for us?" I climbed out and unlocked the trailer door, pulling it open wide. The officers shined their flashlights inside. The boots were still there, sitting on the pallet, exactly where I'd left them. One of the officers climbed into the trailer and picked up one of the boots, examining it closely. He looked at his partner and shook his head. "Anything else missing or out of place?" he asked me. "No, just the pallet. It was in the middle when I loaded it. Now it's at the front." The officer looked at the straps and pallets, then back at me. "Are you sure? Could it have shifted during transport?" "I'm positive. I've been doing this for years. I know how to secure a load." He nodded slowly. "All right, we'll file a report. But there's no sign of forced entry. No footprints. No fingerprints on the door handle. If someone was in here, they didn't leave any evidence." "What about the boots?" "They're old. Could have been in here for a while and you just didn't notice them." "They were warm," I insisted, "like someone had just been wearing them." The officer's expression softened. "Sir, have you been driving for a long time tonight? When's the last time you slept?" I stared at him. "You think I'm making this up? I think you might be tired. Long-haul driving can play tricks on your mind, especially at night." I wanted to argue, to insist that I knew what I'd felt, but I could see in his eyes that he'd already made up his mind. "Look," he said, "why don't you get some rest here for a few hours? There's no evidence of a crime. But if you want, we can have a unit patrol the area while you sleep." I nodded numbly. "Okay, thanks." They left. I closed and locked the trailer door, then climbed back into my cab. But I didn't sleep. I sat there, wide awake, staring at the tunnel entrance visible in the distance. At dawn, I started my engine and drove to Springfield. I delivered my load and told my dispatcher I needed a few days off. He agreed. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about those boots, about the sound of that phantom engine in the tunnel, about the warm leather under my fingers. So I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I searched online. Took me an hour, but I finally found it. A local news article from 2009. Trucker found dead in rest area. Vehicle reported stolen. A 47-year-old truck driver from Springfield, Missouri, was found dead at a rest area on Highway 65 near the Arkansas border on Saturday morning. Authorities say the victim, identified as Robert Lang, appears to have died of natural causes, possibly a heart attack. His truck and cargo were reported stolen from the scene. The vehicle was recovered 3 days later, abandoned in a parking lot in Branson. Police are still investigating the circumstances surrounding the theft and are asking anyone with information to come forward. There was a photo attached. Robert Lang, smiling, wearing a baseball cap and a denim jacket, and work boots, the same boots I'd found in my trailer. I never drove that route at night again, and I never went through that tunnel, because I know what I heard, and I know what I found. Some passengers don't need roads. They just need a ride. U.S. Route 50 cuts across Nevada like a scar through the desert. They call it the loneliest road in America. And once you've driven it, you understand why. For hundreds of miles, there's nothing but scrub brush, alkaline flats, and distant mountain ranges that look like they're painted onto the sky. Towns are few and far between, sometimes 80 or 90 miles apart. And at night, you can drive for an hour without seeing another vehicle. I'd been hauling computer equipment from Sacramento to Salt Lake City for 2 years. The route always took me across US 50 through central Nevada. During the day, it's monotonous but manageable. At night, it becomes something else. The kind of road where your mind starts playing tricks on you, where the darkness feels alive. It was a Wednesday night in early October. I'd left Reno around 10 p.m. with a full load, planning to make it to Ely by 3 a.m. The weather was clear and cold, typical high desert autumn. The stars were so bright they almost hurt to look at. By 3 a.m., I was deep in the loneliest stretch of the road, about 40 miles east of Eureka. No lights, no buildings, just endless darkness pressing in from all sides. My headlights were the only illumination for miles. That's when I saw the overpass ahead. It was unusual. Most of the overpasses on US 50 are simple wooden or steel structures, ranchers' access roads crossing the highway. But this one was concrete. Old. Built sometime in the 60s or 70s probably. It stood out because there was no road leading to it from either side. Just the bridge itself, crossing the highway and disappearing into the desert on both sides. As I approached, my headlights caught something on top of the overpass. A man, standing at the railing, holding what looked like a camera. He was aiming it down at the highway. At me. My first thought was that it was some kind of road survey, maybe a traffic study or wildlife monitoring. But at 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere, that didn't make sense. I slowed down slightly, trying to get a better look. The man was completely still, not adjusting the camera, not looking around, just standing there, frozen, with the camera pointed down at the road. As I got closer, I could make out more details. He was wearing dark clothing, a jacket and jeans, average build. Nothing remarkable, but something about his posture bothered me. It was too rigid, too perfect, like a statue. I passed under the bridge and glanced up through my windshield. The camera lens was pointed directly at me, following my movement, tracking me, but the man holding it wasn't moving. His body remained perfectly still. Only the camera shifted, pivoting smoothly on its axis as I passed underneath. A chill ran down my spine. I looked in my side mirror as the overpass disappeared behind me. The man was still there, silhouetted against the starlit sky, but now he was lowering the camera slowly, deliberately, like he was done, like he'd gotten what he needed. I drove for another 20 miles before I could shake the image from my mind. Something about that encounter felt wrong. The isolated location, the middle of the night, the way the camera had tracked me while the man remained motionless. I grabbed my CB radio and keyed the mic. Breaker 1 to 9, this is driver 5 to 8 eastbound on US 50, about 20 miles west of Ely. Anyone else on this route tonight? Over. Static hissed for a long moment. Then a voice crackled through. This is driver 6 to 2 westbound. I'm about 50 miles east of you. What's up? 5 to 8. Did you pass an overpass about an hour ago? Old concrete bridge, middle of nowhere. Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of them out here. Why? Did you see anyone on it? A guy with a camera? There was a pause. A camera? No, man. I didn't see anyone. Place was empty when I went through. You sure? He was standing right at the railing, pointing it down at the road. I'm positive. I would have noticed that. Are you okay, 5 to 8? You sound a little rattled. Yeah, I'm fine. Just keep an eye out, all right? Copy that. Be safe out there. The radio went silent. I set down the mic and tried to focus on the road ahead. Maybe I'd been driving too long. Maybe the isolation was getting to me. It wouldn't be the first time a driver hallucinated something on this stretch of highway. But I knew what I'd seen. That man. That camera. The way it had tracked me. I pulled into a truck stop in Ely around 4 a.m. The place was nearly deserted. Just one other truck parked in the corner and a clerk behind the counter who looked half asleep. I bought coffee and a sandwich and sat down at one of the plastic tables. I pulled out my phone and searched for US 50 Nevada overpass photographer. Nothing relevant came up. I tried different variations. Still nothing. Then I posted in a trucker forum I used. Anyone driving US 50 through Nevada tonight see a guy on an overpass with a camera? Near mile marker 250-ish. Seemed weird. Just standing there photographing trucks passing underneath. I set my phone down and ate my sandwich. About 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A reply to my post. It was from a driver with the username Desert Hauler 89. I saw the same guy last month. Same overpass. Same camera. I thought it was weird too, so I mentioned it to another driver at a truck stop. He told me he'd seen the same thing 3 weeks earlier. Always the same spot. Always the middle of the night. Always alone. My stomach tightened. I typed back, "Did you report it?" The response came quickly. "Yeah. Called it in to Highway Patrol. They said they'd check it out." But when I drove back through there a week later, I saw something that freaked me out. What? There was a photo taped to the guardrail on the overpass. Just a single printed photo, flapping in the wind. I stopped and climbed up to look at it. I waited, my heart pounding. It was a picture of my truck, taken from above, from that overpass, with a timestamp on the bottom corner. The exact date and time I'd driven through. My blood ran cold. But here's the thing. The timestamp was from before I saw the photographer. Like the photo was taken a day earlier. But I hadn't driven that route the day before. I'd been in California. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. I typed, "What did you do?" I got the hell out of there, and I haven't driven US 50 at night since. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as a hoax or a coincidence. But another part, the part that had seen that camera tracking me, that had felt the wrongness of that encounter, knew it was real. I finished my coffee and walked back to my truck. The sun was starting to rise, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. I decided to get a few hours of sleep before continuing to Salt Lake City. But I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that overpass, about the photographer, about the timestamp. Around 8 a.m., I gave up and started my engine. I decided to take a detour on my way back. I needed to see that overpass again, in daylight, to prove to myself that it was just a normal bridge. Nothing strange, nothing threatening. I drove west on US 50, retracing my route from the night before. The desert looked different in daylight, harsh and unforgiving, but not threatening. Just empty. After about an hour, I found the overpass. It looked smaller in the daylight, more ordinary. The concrete was weathered and cracked. Graffiti covered parts of the railing. Nothing remarkable. I pulled over onto the shoulder and got out. The wind was cold and steady, carrying the smell of sage and dust. I walked around to the embankment that led up to the bridge. That's when I saw it. Something white, flapping in the wind, taped to the guardrail. A photograph. My heart started pounding. I climbed up the embankment, my boots slipping on the loose gravel. When I reached the top, I grabbed the photograph and pulled it free from the tape. It was a picture of my truck, taken from above, from this exact overpass. Clear as day. My license plate visible. My company logo on the trailer door. And in the bottom corner, printed in small black text, 3:17 a.m., October 18th. The date from last night. The exact time I'd passed under the bridge. But that wasn't the worst part. In the driver's side window of the photograph, visible through the glass, was my face. Looking up, mouth slightly open, eyes wide. The exact expression I'd had when I looked up at the photographer. But the photo was taken from an angle that should have been impossible. It was directly above my truck, looking straight down through the windshield, like the camera had been mounted on a drone, or like someone had been floating in the air. My hands started shaking. I flipped the photo over. On the back, written in neat handwriting, was a single sentence. "Thank you for stopping. See you next time." I dropped the photo like it had burned me. It fluttered to the ground, face up, my own terrified expression staring back at me from the glossy surface. I scrambled back down the embankment, nearly falling twice. I jumped into my truck, started the engine, and floored it back toward Ely. I called the Nevada Highway Patrol as I drove, told them everything. The photographer, the overpass, the photo. They took my information and said they'd send someone to investigate. 2 days later, they called me back. Mr. Carter, this is Sergeant Wells with Nevada Highway Patrol. We checked out that overpass you reported. And there's no evidence anyone was there recently. No footprints, no tire tracks, no equipment. We did find some old tape residue on the guardrail, but it could have been from anything. What about the photo? I told you I left it there. We didn't find any photo, sir. That's impossible. I dropped it right there. It was. Sir, I believe you saw something that concerned you, but there's nothing at that location. We've had reports from other drivers about strange sightings on US 50. The isolation and darkness can play tricks on the mind. If you're feeling fatigued while driving, I strongly recommend. I hung up. That night, I checked my email. There was a new message from an unknown sender. No subject line. I opened it. It was the photograph, attached as a digital file. High resolution, crystal clear, and below it, a single line of text. Route 50, mile marker 247. Every Wednesday at 3 a.m. I'll be waiting. I deleted the email immediately. Then I deleted my entire email account, changed my phone number, requested different routes from my dispatcher. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through empty stretches of highway, I think about that overpass, about the photographer who never moved, about the photo that captured a moment from an impossible angle. And I wonder how many other drivers have photos of themselves, taken by someone who shouldn't exist, from a place they should have never been. I don't drive US 50 anymore, ever. Not during the day, not at night, not even for double pay, because some roads are watched, and some photographers never stop taking pictures, even after you've driven away.